In 1948, it cost less than a used car does today. In 2026, it can cost more than most people's houses did back then. This is the story of the single best-selling vehicle in America. Not just trucks, all vehicles, for over 4 decades straight. It started life as a farm tool. It became a status symbol. It survived world wars, recessions, gas crises, and a switch to aluminum that almost every expert said would kill it. It didn't. Today, we're going back to 1948, to a truck that cost around $1,200. And we're going to drive, generation by generation, all the way to the twin-turbo, hybrid-powered, 500,000 units a year monster sitting in driveways right now. 14 generations, 14 redesigns, every single price tag, every engine, every reason this truck became a religion in America. If you've ever wondered why your neighbor, your dad, or half of Texas won't drive anything else, stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how a simple work truck became the ultimate American legend. Let's start at the beginning. Before there was an F-150, there was a man named Henry Ford, a Michigan farmer's son who, in 1903, founded the Ford Motor Company with a simple, almost radical idea. Build a car ordinary people could actually afford. In 1908, that idea became the Model T. In 1913, Ford introduced the moving assembly line and single-handedly changed how the entire world manufactures things. By the 1920s, Ford wasn't just a car company, it was an American institution. But here's what most people don't know. Ford didn't start with trucks. For decades, Ford sold car-based pickups, basically a Model T with a bed bolted on. It wasn't until after World War II, when America was rebuilding, and farmers, tradesmen, and returning soldiers needed something tougher, that Ford decided to build a truck from the ground up. A truck that owed nothing to a passenger car. That decision, made in a design studio in Dearborn, Michigan, in the mid-1940s, is where our story really begins. January 16, 1948. Ford unveils an all-new truck lineup. They call it bonus built, and they call the half-ton version the F1. Nobody in that room had any idea they'd just created the best-selling vehicle in American history. This is where it all started. The 1948 Ford F1. Ford spent roughly $1 million, a massive sum at the time, redesigning this truck from scratch. They called the cab the $1 million cab, and it wasn't just marketing fluff. It was 7 inches wider than anything Ford had built before, with more headroom, more leg room, and a bench seat that actually felt like a place you'd want to sit for 8 hours a day. Under the hood, buyers had 2 choices. A 226 cubic inch flathead inline-6 making 95 horsepower, or, for a little more money, a 239 cubic inch flathead V8 making 100 horsepower. Both ran through a 3-speed manual transmission with a floor shift, because automatic transmissions in trucks were still years away. And here's the number you came for. When the F1 launched in 1948, base pricing started at around $1,230, with fully optioned models creeping up toward $1,500. Adjusted for inflation, that's roughly the price of a decent used sedan today. For that money, you got a truck with a gross vehicle weight rating of just 4,700 pounds, modest by today's standards but revolutionary for its time. The F1 also introduced Ford's naming system, F1 for half-ton, F2 for 3/4 ton, F3 for 1 ton, all the way up to F8 for the heaviest commercial trucks. That same numbering logic, in a different form, still exists in the F150, F250, and F350 you see on the road today. By 1950, Ford had sold over 230,000 F-1 trucks. It wasn't the best-selling truck in America yet. Chevrolet's advanced design trucks still had the edge, but the foundation was laid. And in 1952, this first generation quietly gave way to something that would completely change how Ford named its trucks forever. "1953 was Ford's 50th anniversary. To celebrate, they didn't just refresh the truck, they renamed it. The F1 became the F-100. And that three-digit naming system, F-100, F-250, F-350, is the exact same system Ford still uses today, over 70 years later. Ford marketed this generation as the Triple Economy series. Economy in initial cost, in operation, and in upkeep. It sounds like corporate speak, but in the middle of the Korean War, with steel and materials still tightly regulated, that promise actually mattered. For most of this generation's run, from 1953 to 1955, styling barely changed. But 1956, the final year, brought something significant. A wraparound windshield with vertical A-pillars and an available panoramic rear window. Genuinely advanced glasswork for a work truck at the time. 1956 also marked the first year Ford offered factory seatbelts as an option, years before seatbelts were common in anything, let alone a pickup. Mechanically, this generation also marked a turning point. Ford began transitioning away from the old flathead engine architecture toward modern overhead valve engines, one of the most significant powertrain shifts in F-Series history. Pricing for a base 1953 F-100 landed in the neighborhood of $1,600, a modest bump from the F-1, reflecting a wider cab, a more modern chassis, and, frankly, inflation. It was still a truck built for farmers and tradesmen first, but Ford was already starting to think about comfort. That thinking would explode in the next generation. "1957 arrived in the middle of a recession, and recessions have a strange effect on car companies. They force them to add more value, not less. Ford's answer was the most significant styling shift the truck had seen yet, the style-side bed. Before this, every Ford pickup had a bed with separate fender flares bolted onto the sides, a design that dated back to the Model T era. Style-side changed that completely, integrating the bed, cab, and front fenders into one smooth, flat-sided silhouette. This was the birth of the modern pickup truck shape, the one you still see on dealer lots today. The cab grew roughly 3 inches wider than the previous generation, giving genuinely more shoulder room on that bench seat. Engine options expanded too. A 223 cubic inch straight 6, making 139 horsepower, or a 272 cubic inch V8, making 171 horsepower, numbers that would later grow with the 292 and 332 cubic inch FE Series 5 8S, the same engine family that would eventually go on to power the Ford GT40 at Le Mans. 1959 brought another first. Ford began building four-wheel drive pickups in-house for the first time, rather than relying on aftermarket conversion companies. Base pricing for a 1957 F-100 sat in the range of $1,800, climbing depending on bed style, drivetrain, and engine choice. For that money, buyers got a genuinely modern-looking truck, one that, for the first time, didn't look like a leftover from the 1930s. By 1960, the final year of this generation, Ford revamped the front end one more time with a new rectangular grille, setting the stage for the most dramatic experiment in F-Series history. This is the generation Ford would probably rather you forget, and the one enthusiasts find the most fascinating. For 1961, Ford tried something no other American truck manufacturer had attempted at this scale, a unibody design, welding the cab and bed into a single, continuous structure instead of using a traditional body-on-frame setup. The idea was lighter weight, a smoother ride, and lower manufacturing costs. It didn't work. Rumors spread that overloading the bed could cause the doors to jam shut, and buyers simply didn't trust it. By partway through 1963, Ford quietly dropped the unibody design and went back to a separate bed. But this generation wasn't a total loss. Far from it. In October 1964, for the 1965 model year, Ford introduced an all-new frame that would remain in use all the way through 1979. And alongside it came twin I-beam independent front suspension, a genuinely brilliant engineering solution that gave two-wheel drive trucks a smoother ride than a solid front axle, without sacrificing durability. Twin I-beam became a Ford signature for decades, and 1965 to 66 models even wore a dedicated fender badge announcing it. This generation also introduced the Ranger name, initially just a trim package, not yet its own model, a name that would go on to have a much bigger life of its own. Pricing during this era hovered around $1,900 to $2,000 for a base F-150 depending on configuration, a modest truck by today's standards, but one that, thanks to twin I-beam, genuinely felt more refined to drive than anything Ford had built before. The unibody failed, but everything else Ford learned here would define the next decade of the F-Series. Enthusiasts call this one the bump side, named for the prominent horizontal crease running the length of the truck from the front fender all the way back through the bed. It's one of the most recognizable Ford truck silhouettes ever made. This generation marks the moment Ford stopped thinking of the pickup as purely a work tool and started thinking of it as something people might actually choose over a car. The Ranger and Ranger XLT trims arrived here, bringing carpeting, extra sound insulation, and chrome trim to a segment that had, until now, been almost entirely about utility. Factory air conditioning became a genuinely viable option for the first time. The 300 cubic inch inline six carried over from the previous generation, joined by new 360 and 390 cubic inch FE big block V8 options for buyers who wanted serious towing power. One quirky detail: Ford changed the front grille design nearly every single model year of this generation, never repeating the same look twice in a row. By 1972, the final year, the grille had gone from 6 rectangular openings per side down to 4 larger ones, and the 302 V8 became the standard engine across much of the lineup. A base 1967 F-150 started at roughly $2,200, climbing well past that with the Ranger package, air conditioning, and a V8. For the first time, the sticker price genuinely reflected a truck built for comfort, not just labor. This is also the generation where the phrase daily driver truck really starts to make sense, and it set the stage for one of the most important years in this truck's entire history. Everything before this moment was building toward one thing: the birth of the name that's now on hundreds of thousands of trucks sold every single year. Nicknamed the dent side for the crease running along its flanks, this generation launched in 1973 with heavier use of galvanized steel to fight rust, and in 1974 introduced the Super Cab, an extended cab option that gave buyers real behind-seat storage for the first time. Then came 1975. Emissions regulations were tightening across the industry, and lighter trucks were suddenly facing stricter rules than heavier ones. Ford's solution was almost sly. Introduce a heavier-duty version of the F-150, built on the same half-ton chassis but with beefier axles and springs, and skip the catalytic converter requirement that came with the lighter F-150. They called it the F-150. It worked. And it worked so well that by 1977, the F-Series overtook Chevrolet's C/K trucks to become the best-selling truck in America, a title it has never given up since, not for one single year. By 1978, square headlights replaced round ones on upper trims, becoming standard across the board in 1979. The same year, the massive 460 cubic inch V8 made its final appearance in a half-ton truck. A 1975 F-150 started at roughly $3,300 to $3,900 depending on configuration. Real money at the time, but still dramatically less than a comparable truck costs today even before adjusting for inflation. The F-150 name that started as a loophole to dodge emissions testing would go on to become one of the most valuable names in the entire automotive industry. By the late 1970s, gas prices were spiking and Detroit was in crisis. Ford's response for the F-150 was its first complete ground-up redesign since 1965, a new chassis, a new body, and a new nickname, the Bullnose, named for the slight forward slant of the grille meeting the hood line. This truck was visually narrower than its predecessor, specifically to reduce frontal area and cut wind resistance. It brought flush composite headlights, an industry first for an American truck. And in 1982, the now iconic Ford Blue Oval logo appeared on the grille for the very first time. 1983 introduced Ford's first diesel pickup engine option, a 6.9-liter IDI V8. And in 1985, electronic fuel injection arrived on the 5.0-liter V8, boosting output to 185 horsepower, a huge jump over the carbureted 130 horsepower version. This generation also ended the F-100 nameplate entirely and dropped sealed beam headlights and the Ranger name as a standalone trim, folding everything under the F-150 banner going forward. A base 1980 F-150 started at roughly $5,500 to $6,000, nearly 5 times the price of the original 1948 F-1, but adjusted for 4 decades of inflation, actually a very reasonable jump. By 1986, the final year of the Bullnose, Ford had built one of the most beloved and durable generations in F-150 history. A truck so simple and reliable that thousands are still daily driven 40 years later. (1987) marked the F-Series' 50th anniversary, and Ford celebrated with a smoother, more aerodynamic exterior facelift over the previous chassis, new flush composite headlights, and a genuine engineering milestone. The 1987 F-Series became the first truck in the industry to offer standard rear anti-lock brakes. But the real headline came in 1988. That year, Ford became the first pickup manufacturer in America to sell a fully non-carbureted engine lineup. Every single engine, from the base 6-cylinder to the big V8S, now ran on fuel injection. That same year, the 6.9-liter diesel was replaced by a larger 7.3-liter IDI diesel, making 180 horsepower and 365 pound-feet of torque. 1989 brought automatic locking hubs to four-wheel drive F-150S, and 1991 introduced a new night trim package, an all-blacked-out appearance option that's become a serious collector favorite today. Pricing for a base 1987 F-150 started at approximately $9,000, reflecting not just inflation, but genuinely more standard technology than any previous generation, including fuel injection and ABS brakes that simply didn't exist on the truck a decade earlier. This was also the last generation before Ford's next redesign would completely change the truck's face for the 1990s. And introduce a nickname that stuck permanently, OBS, or Old Body Style, a term enthusiasts still use to this day. Enthusiasts call this generation two things: Aeronos, for its aerodynamic front-end redesign, and OBS, old body style, the nickname that stuck permanently once Ford moved on to a completely different design in 1997. Built on the same core chassis as the previous generation, but wearing a much more rounded wind-cheating body, this truck brought real comfort upgrades, better insulation, softer seats, and in 1995, the first genuine luxury trim in F-150 history, the Eddie Bauer package, complete with two-tone paint, unique aluminum wheels, and tinted glass. But the truck enthusiasts actually chase today is the 1993 F-150 SVT Lightning, a two-door, short-bed performance truck available only in black or red, packing a reinforced 5.8-liter V8, making 240 horsepower and 460 pound-feet of torque. It was Ford's answer to the muscle car era colliding head-on with the pickup market, and it remains one of the most collectible F-150s ever built. By 1995, the F-Series achieved something almost unbelievable. It surpassed the Volkswagen Beetle to become the best-selling vehicle in the entire world, not just America, not just trucks. Every vehicle of any kind, sold anywhere. Base pricing for a 1992 F-150 started around $11,000 to $12,000, and collectors today specifically seek this generation out because it was the last to use Ford's simple, easy-to-modify pushrod V8S before the switch to modern overhead cam engines. In 1996, this body style quietly ended production, and Ford was about to deliver the most dramatic redesign the truck had seen in over 3 decades. This is one of the most important generations in the truck's entire history, not because of styling, but because of a structural decision that still shapes Ford's truck lineup today. For 1997, Ford gave the F-150 its first complete ground-up redesign since 1979, an entirely new chassis, new body, and the retirement of the twin I-beam front suspension that had defined Ford trucks since 1965. This new F-150 won Motor Trend's Truck of the Year for 1997, but the biggest change happened in 1999. Ford split its truck lineup in two. The F-150 became a dedicated light-duty, half-ton truck aimed at everyday buyers and families. The heavier F-250 and F-350 were spun off entirely into a new separate platform, Ford Super Duty. From this point forward, a Super Duty truck was never simply a bigger F-150 again. They were engineered completely independently. This generation also introduced the Super Crew, Ford's first true four-door crew cab, F-150, which entered production in December 1999 and launched as part of the 2001 model year. It was a direct response to the growing demand for trucks that could comfortably seat a family of 5. The SVT Lightning returned in 1999 with a supercharged 5.4-liter V8, making 360 horsepower. And by 2001, the King Ranch luxury trim arrived, followed by Harley-Davidson special editions, proof that trucks were now being cross-shopped against luxury SUVs, not just work vehicles. A base 1997 F-150 started at approximately $17,875, more than 14 times the price of the original 1948 F1, even before adjusting for inflation. Sales exploded past 900,000 units in 2001 alone, outpacing both GM and Chrysler's competing trucks combined in some years. Built on Ford's new P2 platform with a fully boxed frame, the 2004 F-150 brought back some of the more angular, muscular styling of earlier decades, a deliberate move away from the rounded, aerodynamic look of the 1990s. The most visually distinctive addition was the triple-bar grille, borrowed from the Super Duty line, along with front door windows featuring a stepped lower edge, a design detail Ford still uses on current F-150s today. Engine choices spanned a 4.2-liter V6 and Triton-badged 4.6-liter and 5.4-liter V8s. This generation also produced a badge-engineered luxury cousin, the Lincoln Mark LT, sold from 2005 through 2008, sharing its platform with the F-150, and it served as the mechanical foundation for the Ford Expedition and Lincoln Navigator SUVs. Trim levels exploded during this era. FX2, FX4, Lariat, King Ranch, and Harley-Davidson editions all competed for attention, and performance tuners Saleen and Roush both offered forced induction upgrade packages. A base 2004 F-150 started at approximately $17,900, barely more than the 1997 model, showing just how competitive the full-size truck market had become by the mid-2000s. This generation earned an IIHS top safety pick and a top NHTSA rating, proof that by the mid-2000s, the F-150 wasn't just competing on toughness anymore. It was competing on safety, comfort, and technology, setting the stage for the most powerful engine era the truck had ever seen. This is the generation that changed how the entire industry thinks about truck engines, forever. The 2009 F-150 debuted at the Detroit Auto Show with a larger, more flexible interior, an updated 3-bar grille, and Ford's first version of the Sync voice control system, along with Bluetooth hands-free connectivity and USB ports, technology that felt genuinely futuristic in a work truck at the time. In 2010, Ford introduced the SVT Raptor, not a drag strip performance truck like the old Lightning, but a genuine desert racing machine, inspired directly by Baja racing trucks, with upgraded Fox suspension and specialized off-road hardware. But the real revolution came in 2011. Ford introduced the 3.5-liter EcoBoost twin-turbocharged V6, the F-150's first turbocharged engine ever, alongside the modern 5.0-liter Coyote V8. The EcoBoost proved a turbocharged V6 could match or beat V8 towing and horsepower numbers while delivering meaningfully better fuel economy. It was a genuine gamble for Ford, and it paid off so completely that the 3.5 EcoBoost remains in the lineup today, over a decade later. This generation was also the last F-150 to use a fully steel body and steel bed, the calm before an even bigger storm. A base 2009 F-150 started at approximately $22,000. Reflecting a truck now loaded with technology that simply didn't exist on any pickup a decade earlier. By 2014, the final year of this generation, Ford was quietly preparing the most controversial redesign in the truck's entire 76-year history. When word leaked in 2013 that Ford was switching the F-150's body from steel to aluminum, the internet lost its mind. Rival ad campaigns mocked it. Competitors ran commercials showing hail damage and puncture tests. Critics said Ford had just committed corporate suicide with its most profitable product. Ford did it anyway. The 2015 F-150 introduced a high-strength, military-grade aluminum alloy body over a fully boxed, high-strength steel frame, shedding up to 700 pounds compared to the previous generation. That weight loss alone pushed highway fuel economy from around 23 miles per gallon toward nearly 30, while simultaneously increasing available towing capacity to over 12,000 pounds at launch. The gamble worked. The 2015 F-150 won the North American Truck of the Year award and became the first full-size Ford pickup to earn a full 5-star NHTSA safety rating. By 2017, a 10-speed automatic transmission became available, and in 2018, Ford added its first-ever F-150 diesel option, a 3.0-liter Power-Stroke Turbo V6. Every major truck manufacturer in America has since followed Ford's lead into aluminum and mixed material construction, proof that the crazy bet actually redefined the entire industry. A base 2015 F-150 started at approximately $26,615, a significant jump from the previous generation, reflecting both the new materials and a genuinely more advanced truck. By 2020, the final year of this generation, Ford had proven every skeptic wrong. And it was time for one more transformation, this time into a full hybrid future. And this brings us to today. The 2021 F-150 didn't just get new sheet metal, it got a new powertrain philosophy entirely. For the first time in F-150 history, Ford introduced a full hybrid option, the 3.5-liter PowerBoost, combining the proven EcoBoost V6 with a 47-horsepower electric motor built directly into the 10-speed transmission. It delivers, according to Ford, the most torque and horsepower of any light-duty full-size pickup on sale, all while using regenerative braking to recharge its battery on the move. Then there's Pro Power onboard, turning the truck itself into a mobile generator. Standard gas engines offer 2.0 kilowatts of exportable power. The PowerBoost Hybrid comes standard with 2.4 kilowatts, or an optional 7.2 kilowatt setup with a full 240-volt outlet, powerful enough to run a house during an outage or an entire job site's worth of power tools. This generation also introduced Active Drive Assist, hands-free driving capability on over 100,000 miles of divided highway across the U.S. and Canada, using a driver-facing camera to track eye position and attention. And in May 2021, Ford unveiled something the truck world had never seen before, the F-150 Lightning, a fully electric version of America's best-selling truck, producing up to 580 horsepower and offering up to 320 miles of range, reviving a legendary performance name for a completely new era. A base 2021 F-150 XL started at approximately $28,940, nearly 24 times the price of the original 1948 F1, even before adjusting for over 7 decades of inflation. And yet, every single year, more Americans buy this truck than any other vehicle on Earth. From a $1,200 farm truck built to move hay bales to a $29,000 starting price on a hybrid pickup that can power your entire house, the F-150 didn't just survive 76 years of American history, it defined it. 14 generations, one name that outlasted wars, recessions, fuel crises, and a material switch nobody thought would work. If you made it this far, you now know more about the F-150 than most people who've owned one their entire lives. Which generation was your favorite? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want the next deep dive, maybe the Chevy Silverado or the full history of the Ford Bronco, hit subscribe to Jimmy Jen Versus, because we're just getting started.